Okay, everybody, we are live. Welcome. I am now recording. This is the Monday Q&A, and we're also going to cover the blending exercise and discussion of blending. So this is kind of anybody's opportunity to ask anything they need, and then we'll go over the blending exercise and kind of take it from there. So let me go ahead and do a share screen here, move everybody up here, and this is the handout that went out Wednesday, so everybody should have a copy of this. If you don't, let me know. And the idea is just kind of review what I went over Wednesday. You know, we tend to do things in a wine vacuum. Karen and I had a nice conversation about that today on our phone call, didn't we? Oh no, that was Noel. I'm sorry, Noel. I'm getting my people mixed up. And just how we tend to sort of accept things status quo. We look at things from an enthusiast point of view, and rarely do people really say, wow, wouldn't that be really expensive? Or if you did that, how much money would that decision in production or barrel aging take away from your marketing budget, or sales incentives you could spend, or incentives for signing up for your wine club or whatever? So thinking in the sphere of business, up and down the supply chain, every point are decisions to be made, an opportunity for critical thinking, to look at the financial implications, the quality, the marketing value of the decision, and also the allocation of resources, both money and time, that a certain decision would require. So in the world of blending, there's so much misinformation. Pop quiz. Anybody know what the major wine red grape variety is in Bordeaux?
Carignan.
Pardon?
Carignan?
No, Bordeaux, France. What's the major grape variety?
What, Merlot?
It is Merlot by far, but so often you'll see, oh, Merlot's the blending grape. It's like there's 10 times more Merlot in Bordeaux than there is Cabernet. And there are certain areas where Cabernet predominate, and sometime in many of the famous wines, like Lafite and Latour and so on. But then you've got Petrus, which is predominantly Merlot. You've got Cheval Blanc, that's Cabernet Franc. And so we again sort of take things from the point of view of an enthusiast rather than digging a little deeper to truly understand, what's behind the facade, what's behind the marketing story that we've been told. Okay. So with blending, the way it looks is as I've said several times, winemakers aren't, a little dash of this and a little bit of this, because they know in 24 hours the blend will taste differently. They're looking at the quality of the material, they're looking at the availability and the cost of the material that's going in it, and then it becomes largely a business function. I'm going to be sending out a link to a video, I hope I still have it, with Aaron Pott. Aaron's one of the current rock star status winemakers. He's a really good friend of mine, and in the video, we're talking about when you're blending for one of your major properties, and he does winemaking in Bordeaux, France. He does it in California and around the world. What drives the decision of what goes into the blend? And his answer is simple. It's any of the material that meets the basic standard of quality that we have for the final wine goes into the blend. So if you're a small estate and you're doing blending and it's all your own vineyards, you want every drop possible that you can get into that product without compromising the integrity of, of, of the overall intensity and complexity and so on of the wine. And so the blend year after year is dictated by, at the highest level, by the quality of the material that might be, some from this vineyard of another variety or the same variety from another vineyard. You're optimizing your profitability by using as much of the material as possible in the wine that you're going to be selling. Give you the highest, production quantity, combined with and balanced against ensuring that it meets the expectations of the market. Okay. So, any questions about where we are, or just questions in general before we dive into things? Okay. So the way that that we've constructed this blending session is to get my toys out. You'll need some wine, and you just go into the store and purchase some. You can soak off the labels or whatever you need. And then this is a formula. In a second, we're going to talk about this formula and supply and demand. And that's what Rich and I were just discussing before everybody showed up. And so the idea is, Rich, do you mind if we share the wines? What wines did you purchase and kind of what direction you're going?
No, that's fine. I get the receipt here and get my reading glasses on. Well, let's see here. I've got a Frank Family Petite Syrah. It was $32. I've got an Olima Cabernet. It was $27. I've got a Radius Merlot that was $12. A Lindemans Cabernet that was $4.25.
Right on.
A Root Cabernet that was $9.99. And a Baran Zinfandel that was $19.99. Now, I did get 10% off of all of that, so.
As you should. And everybody remember, when you're buying and trading in the bulk wine space, everything's negotiable. So another place where reality follows fantasy. Okay, so and it sounds like you're going for just sort of a not a classic blend, but you're looking as if you can put some Petite Syrah in with Cabernet, so it's not a Bordeaux blend per se, or Correct. A Super Tuscan and so forth. Awesome.
Correct.
And are you going to be, when you set this up, are you going to do it yourself, or are you going to have some other people involved?
I think I'm going to have probably my wife, my 2 older daughters, and their 2 significant others, so it'll probably be 6 of us.
Fantastic. So one of the things Rich and I were talking about, here's a fun thing to do, especially if you're setting it up. If you've got one of the wines, I think you said you had something that was $19.99 a bottle, a Zin or something like that?
Correct.
Instead of using this general formula for your cost per gallon, artificially make it cheap as hell. Put $5 a gallon on it and see if the people that are tasting it can recognize, wait a minute, this is cheap, but it's really good.
I got you. Yeah.
So we always love to kind of throw this. It's called a ringer, and just throw the ringer in there and just sort of chuckle to yourself. And it's also fun when the ringer is actually a pretty well-known wine or a wine that's gotten good ratings, because as soon as it's just the mentality of human beings. This is something I study, actually, the neurology of perception. When you see that something's cheap or that something's, you know, from a certain place, our brain already fills in the expectation before we even try it. So it's just kind of a fun process. And this is a really important aspect of learning at a professional level, blind tasting. And this is basically what the bulk wine specialists, people who live and breathe this business, are taught to do. Is they may have 100 samples of a given type of wine in sample bottles that they have to go systematically through and evaluate what's the general quality of this. At a technical level, is there anything that I need to consider that maybe that a certain wine's really inexpensive, maybe it has a flaw or something that makes it relatively unattractive, but could a good winemaker fix that? So could you do additional treatments or fining or adjustments or whatever? Or that maybe in this case, versus the kind of the estate model of blending, maybe if I used this, could I use other wines that had different characteristics to kind of to settle in on a better balance? Okay. So anyways, the other thing that Rich and I were talking about, these are just swag, which is technical speak for scientific wild ass guess, conversion rates. All right. 6 months ago, this was a valid conversion rate, but supply and demand are actually, things are gaining velocity even as we're in this class. And one could argue that your $4 bottle of wine should be $4 a gallon, because prices are coming down dramatically, supplies are increasing. There's Noelle. How are you?
Hi. Sorry, I'm late.
Not a problem. You'll be able to catch up on it easily.
Okay, excellent.
And so, so we're talking about conversion rates and value in a shifting market supply-demand dynamics. So that we're looking at the wine blending sheet that I sent out last week and the conversion rate, and you'll be able to watch the first 15 minutes and catch up on what you missed. Okay. So then the other thing is, Rich, you can even send just even a short little email or however, the people that you're going to have in your blending say, okay, guys, this is what I'm setting up. We're gonna do this. And again, you could have measuring cups, or you can have graduated cylinders. You don't have to sweat the details. But let them know. Are you going to kind of do this as if it's actually a blend for your winery, Rich?
I'm just playing with it. I could have actually. I have sample bottles.
Yeah.
Actually.
And so again, you know, set up with it according to what you have available and so on. But let everybody know. Come with an idea for the name of our winery.
Okay.
So in this roles and objectives and stuff, make sure that, you know, that people are prepared to have fun, but also put their creative caps on and do some role playing. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So then when you get everything set up, say, okay, guys, what are we going to name the winery? And really take to heart how hard this is. A lot of people like to name the winery after themselves. That is a bad business idea. Ask William Hill. what he thinks after he sold the winery to Gallo. They own his name now. Bill's an old friend of mine. I've been there from literally the first wine he's ever replaced. And if you ever get a few drinks in them and want to get them started, to say, hey, Bill, how come you sold your name? Right? And you've got every derivation of creeks and hills and mountains and, you know, whatever that are incorporated, you know, geographic points or fanciful names, names with all sorts of translation meanings from Latin or this or that. And don't forget, you got to name the winery and what are you going to name your red blend, okay?
Yep.
So when you get started, just pour the wines in small quantities like you would for a normal tasting, and then let everybody just take their notes, and that's basically what this first page is. You can print these out and hand them out. And then have everybody play with some blends kind of on their own. And then have a discussion of what are we liking here? What direction are we going to have? And have somebody lead the group that's not you.
Seriously.
Well, you get to choose. You get to do whatever you want. You don't even have to do this if you don't want. But you're really missing out on something fun, because again, what you're going to see is what kind of questions come up, what kind of dilemmas, what kind of problems need to be solved. So then what you do is after you've done your notes and have everybody play with some trials, then you can say, okay, we're going to do 4 test batches, and so you can sort of, you know, decide, is it all the wines, or are you using some and not the others, or whatever, and then have everybody leave the room, and then see if you can do a little blind taste off of the final blends that you were talking about and considering. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then and the easiest way to do that is to have everybody force rank each of the 4 blends, and try to make them different. And the force ranking, which one do you like? You know, most to least, 1 through 4. Then add up the scores and see which wine hits. Now, the other thing that you can do is to have your Wine Biz Sim open. Remember that you're going to the Blending Profitability Workbook, and hit new. It'll open up a new, and if you've saved it, don't forget that you can go back. So you can actually go in and put in, you know, the ID that this is, however you decide to do it, wine A, or this is the Cabernet Sauvignon, and you could even put the price per gallon. But you're going to put the cost per gallon in here, and then what percentage of the blend it might be. And then if you've got a couple wines that are really close, you can say, okay, let's look at the numbers. And you can actually say, okay, let's run a trial for the first blend, and then you can shift the numbers around for another blend and see what it does to your gross margin, and let your tasting team know this is your payroll, this is your bonuses, this is your incentives that we're blending for, and then see which wine tastes the best. You know, in that final determination, aesthetically, what tastes delicious, if it's close enough, which one's the most profitable. Does that make sense? Now, for anybody who likes this kind of crap, like me, go to a winemaking supply website. You can even just go to Amazon.com, type in oat chips. And for a couple bucks, you could actually take one of the wines that you're doing, throw some oak chips in there, and make it oaky as hell. Yep, Rich knows the game. You can add all sorts of coloring adjuncts, tannins and phenolics. So there's two things you could do. One, you could say, okay, well, I guess we like this blend okay, but what would happen if we upped the high toast French oak character and literally throw in a handful of chips, let it set an hour, put it through a strainer,
You
try
could
and
actually-
let it settle a little bit, and then try it later and see what you like.
The way to do that, Tim, is almost to make a tea. You boil them in some water,
Yep.
let the water reduce a little bit, and then you can take a few drops and put it into your sample.
Yep, there's so many ways to do it. And then another way, wait a minute, where's my adjuncts? I've got this stuff spread out. You can also buy liquid adjuncts. These are called oak adjuncts, you guys.
I've tried that, and the junk part is about right.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. But have you ever tried the Pro Nectar Radu?
Don't believe I have.
So there's as many variables as there are with oak type and Cooper and toast level and forest origin. I've actually, this was a good friend of mine actually did these, and these are incredibly high quality oak adjuncts that you can add as a liquid. They're not cheap either, but they can emulate the character of the wine, and they're legal for putting into wine.
What is it called?
It's called Pro Nectar. It's a PRONEKTAR. And so I've got about 30 of these. And this is extreme complex French oak staves, 1,000% new oak equivalent. So this is just a highly concentrated versus another form that they have. So they've got all sorts of forms and spice versus vanilla versus complex versus smoky and all this kind of stuff. And this is what modern winemakers are looking at in terms of how do I get the flavor profile I'm looking for and deliver that. And again, this isn't necessarily all that new. The technologies are new, but these kind of decisions, years and years ago, 1980 something, early 80s, I got to meet Hubert Lamy, Lamy from Burgundy. Loved these sort of obscure areas. He was making some really great quality wines like Saint Aubin and areas that are a little lesser known than the big name Burgundies. And I was on a trip to France, and he said, I want you to taste 2 wines, and you tell me which oak you prefer, and I'll make it for you that way. God, I thought I was hot stuff. And it was also my period that I couldn't get enough oak. I went through that period. A lot of us do. Many people don't. And so when I made my selection, it was kind of, Americans, you have no taste. So anyways, so that's how this goes. This is how to construct the tasting. If you do nothing else, go in and look on the winebusiness.com classifieds or wine industry network and see what some of the bulk wines that are available, and just plug numbers in and play with it. Okay, so have fun with this, and it really kind of reinforces an awful lot of what goes on. And then I'm going to send a link to this. I sent out a link to the 2019 Silicon Valley Bank report, but this is a little bit older one. How much did wineries really make in 2018? Okay, and so there are a lot of data in here on how much margin wineries are making today versus the past few years, kind of what are the trends, so on and so forth. Okay? So I'm going to just kind of open it up to questions and so forth. And Noel, thank you for posting. I asked Noel to do a paid advertising for anybody who needs to set up a call. I'm going to be gone this weekend, but after Monday next week, it'd be a great time if anybody needs a call. And whenever I have the call, I ask whoever I have the call with, in your own words, please post something on the discussion forum, because so many people just I never hear from them in the entire course and wonder what the hell happened to them. But I love having these calls, and a lot of people find them very useful.
Okay.
It was very useful.
Yay. All right. So at this point, kind of anything production oriented, anything about blending, about custom crush, about different winery models. So this is just now Q&A, and if there are no Q's, we cut it short.
I don't know what everyone's reason is for taking this class. Everyone didn't put their bios up on the screen, but going back to what we were talking about earlier with supply and demand in the market and various things. If someone were looking at trying to start a negotiant wine company or a small winery back in the East Coast or Midwest or whatever, right now is a wonderful time to get in on the bulk wine market.
Yes.
You can literally buy for pennies on the dollars, and several of the wines that I went and purchased today are probably, similar wines are probably for sale per gallon what I paid per bottle at the store today.
Why are prices so low?
Supply and demand.
Because demand's going down.
Actually, demand is still went up, I believe, 3%. There was still 3% growth in the market last year, but production was so high and there's so much in the backlog that it just happens from time to time.
Right. So the combination is supply is kind of or demand is kind of leveling off in the U.S. A lot of people, and we're going to, when we get into marketing, we'll go into this a little bit more detail, because I'm starting to feed you guys a little bit more marketing data, as you may have noticed. So demand might not change, but if supply changes, it can dramatically affect things. Here's another thing. What's going on with U.S. sales in China?
Well, we're in a trade war with them, so.
Arabs, yep.
Yeah.
So I feel like our sales are probably not good.
They are not. They've never been great, because we're not an export focus or export necessary country like Australia is, and like France has become. But we'll get to that in a second. So right now, the combined duty and taxes on U.S. wines, a $10 wine is $18.50 as soon as it clears customs.
Okay.
All right. So it's about an 85% value added. So a $10 wine is $18.50. A $100 wine is $185. All right. So you always have to look at tax and duty. Is it based on value, or is it a per gallon, or some sort of alcohol equivalence, right? So that means then, and then you compare that against what it is against Australia and Chile, and they're paying about 27%. They've got zero duty.
Ooh.
So our $10, $18.50 landed is their $10, $12.75 or $12.70 landed.
$12.70.
Yeah, and very likely with less shipping costs. Okay.
If we weren't in this trade situation with them, what was did the price just go up? Is that 85% fairly new, or?
That's new, right? It was at about 62%.
62. Okay, that was my question.
Yes.
So even in more favorable conditions, we were at 62% versus Australia and Chile, like around 27.
We suck at export.
Yeah.
Totally. And then look at large economies like France, where so much of their entire economy is built around wine and vineyards, and if you go back into the 70s, 1 out of every 10 people in France was employed directly or indirectly by the wine trade.
1 in 10.
And that's huge. So what the government does, just like our government does in other ways, when the French wine industry starts tanking, they provide government subsidies to lower the cost of goods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, if you're doing your homework, go in and look at some of the Rhone blends and go, holy crap, this wine's selling, for $6 or $7 from France, from the Languedoc or wherever it's from. How the hell does that get over here with all the additional freight and insurance and taxes, and still sell for less than somebody in Washington or Virginia or California could sell the wine for?
Yeah, I actually did have that question. So subsidies would make sense. That would be bridging that gap.
And so as we're going through, these are the kind of things to start now, linking together and seeing if we can set those dots. So let's say that the U.S. consumption is even growing, but now we've got a lot of product that was directed to the China market that's not going to go there. Where's it going to go? There's really not much else. And what's going on in China that if it started to actually compromise French wine sales, where's that wine going to go? If France started to lose their greatly favored fashion status and association in China, if France loses market share, where do they go? And the answer is U.S. It's the only strong, large wine economy in the world. We're the market to go to. So now you've got subsidized wines in addition to our own product coming back here.
So is this happening across all categories, or is it just the bulk wine? Is it in the fine wine sector too, or is it all the way across?
Start that again. I'm sorry. What was that?
Is this happening across all categories of wine, or is it just bulk wine, or is it?
It's all categories, and it's volatile as hell in the luxury area because China's grappling with bribing and gifting that is out of control. And so I actually went to do some events 3 years ago in China. My wife, Kate, was with me. We were doing these events at a private club in Beijing. We have a Chinese godson, and all this is related.
Oh.
we got to China, and there had been a new clampdown on ostentatious displays of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That meant no, and literally the club that we were at, the name was changed. There was nothing saying club. There was no private, no nothing. The whole place had changed signage and everything about it. The people who were attending this event are often high level officials in shipping or in the government and whatever. First time I've ever seen this, they asked for all the name tags to be removed, so nobody would know that they're the president of this, or that they're associated with this or with this branch of government. And our godson disappeared. His family owned a development in Kunming with an Arnold Palmer golf course and these $1 million second homes. And it had to be converted overnight, virtually, into a retirement center because second homes and golf became no, you don't. That's one of the main places where they bribe and do all these things.
Wow.
So imagine that swiftly in a market that is clamped down on gifting, frowning on the high-end, ostentatious Lafite and Petrus and Romanée Conti, the clubs where these wines are mostly drunk and toasted and whatever have all gone, and then high-end clubs and resorts are immediately shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the actual production capacities, the development track, and the quality for wines being produced in China? It's all going like that. They are making some terrific Dan wines, from ice wine to red wines to you name it. They are planting lots of vineyards because they're trying to repurpose grain that's gone to distilled spirits and beer back to food sources. So the government's actually promoting planting vineyards and so on.
Oh.
And we're not really, the efforts of sales in China are not to create wine consumers. It's all based around face, the prestige, the BS, and the story. So what happens if we really don't create consumers in China? Their production starts to reach its full potential.
Mm-hmm.
They start to be less dependent on French wines or even Australia or whatever. What does that do? And maybe they even start exporting good enough quality wines to actually make a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then? And so right now we're seeing the early warning signs, and this is where these things come up, is in the bulk wine market is where you start to see the changes happen first, right, Rich?
I would say so. I mean, you know, personally, if somebody brought a bottle of Chinese wine to my house, I'm probably gonna not like it. But as far as the bulk goes, I mean, I remember several years in which California growers were having substantial financial difficulty because their grapes weren't fetching enough money to pay for the growing, and a lot of the large wineries were bringing in bulk from South America and, you know, Chile and Argentina and whatever, and, you know, blending it into their wines in place of buying grapes here in California.
Well, and that there has to be a caveat: where legal and where authorized. And
no, but I think they can do it up to whatever it is percent, and they would, you know, buy the stuff by the not by the truck tanker load, but by the ocean tanker load, and bring it in here and use it in those blends.
So I want everybody, when you're in a store, to go see if you can find some of the lowest price products. I'm not sure if it's even still in the market. But 4 years ago, we were doing this exercise. Number one, find out where your Sutter Home Moscato is produced in your market, because they have to pull from 4 different countries to be able to keep up with the supply.
Mm-hmm.
And in some markets it's Australian, some it's Argentinian, some it's California, and some it's Italian.
Okay.
And I think because supply demand there, I think they just canceled all the contracts for the Italian product because that was the most expensive and the hardest to deal with. We were looking at low-end products for big names, and we found a Behringer. I can't remember if it was their Founders series or whatever, but it was $3.99 Cabernet and it was entirely from Chile.
Okay.
So this is again the value of the homework and going out and speculating and really going, holy crap, there's stuff going on here I never knew about. And again, that 90% of the experts, 90% of the people sitting the Master of Wine exam have no clue of any of this stuff, right? So
on the cheap Moscato that you were just talking about, a lot of times what they do there too is they ferment it to dry, and it sits in a bulk container till it's time to bottle it, or a bulk tank, and then they back sweeten it with concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
Concentrate or just fresh sterilized juice.
Well, yeah. Well, they can't. It costs a lot of money to keep it refrigerated so it won't ferment.
Well, it can be stabilized in other ways, but this for anybody who wants to geek out, this is the German process called Susse Reserve,
Mm-hmm.
SUSSE Reserve. And it was also the turning point when the wine insiders started to tell the completely false story. Sweet wine is bad wine. Sweetness is used to hide flaws. The French drink dry wines. They never did. They always loved sweet wine. So did the Germans. So did the Spanish. So did the Italians. But during World War II, one of the filter companies, and you'll see these filters in wineries today, Seitz, S-E-I-T-Z, Seitz filters. Seitz invented sterile filtering, and it was a game changer in wartime, because for the first time, water could be filtered to remove all the microbes and all the baddies, and clean drinking water could be supplied to troops in the field. And it was a game changer, because you can imagine you've got these squadrons and battalions and armies and whatever that all have dysentery.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't very efficient during that kind of stuff. And so after World War II, the Germans thought, yeah, Bill, what if we picked our underripe grapes when it's safe and whatever, and then we add sterile juice back to it, or concentrate, and then we sterile filter it again to remove any microbes, and then you can keep it stored under the proper conditions, unrefrigerated or not, or whatever. But it was the first time in history inexpensive table wines could be made sweet and shipped commercially.
Yeah, typically though, don't they sterile filter them just before they bottle them? There is no standard. It's just a matter of type of wine, situation,
Concentrate makes it easy because it gives you a little bit more control, and then in the concentrating, depending on how it's concentrated, you can also stabilize and sterilize it during that. So pasteurization and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So again, there's the thing is don't think there's a single answer. Think, I wonder how many ways it could be done. And of course, the most notorious concentrate now is, if you look in the Grape Crusher report, you're going to find a grape variety called Ruby Red. Who's ever seen a wine made with Ruby Red? Okay. Ruby Red is a tinted grape. There's a handful of these. Alicante Bouschet, there's a form of Gamay, and they actually have red skin and dark red juice from the get-go. And so that's made into Mega Purple, or more technically, it's called Purple 8000. A brand name of it for Canandaigua's Mega Purple. But this is a way that you can add just the tiniest bit of a relatively, it's not cheap, it's an expensive product. I actually have a little container of Ruby Red, or a Purple 8000. So anyways, that's a way for red wines also. Now, one of the things with Moscato, the reason that the favor tends to be towards juice versus concentrate, Rich, is in the concentrate, you don't get that wonderful effusive aromatics.
Yeah.
Okay. And I actually led the product redevelopment, repositioning of Moscato for Trinchero that launched the whole Moscato boom. I did that. And one, it was identifying a market, which we'll talk about my work in that later in this course. But the fact was that there were millions and millions of white Zin drinkers that finally we were browbeating into feeling like trailer trash and unsophisticated morons because of the wine they love. We're not a smart industry. You could see what was going on by looking at bulk wine inventories and movement of things. So supply and demand was shifting, and those drinkers weren't changing. They were just finally getting sick and tired of the sneering and the snobbery that we aim at them. And my mother-in-law, who's a PhD in economics and a millionaire and was a pro tour golfer and just bright as shit, as a white Zin drinker, nobody understands her. And I said, I was pulled into a meeting and they said, you know, what's the next big thing? I said, Moscato. They said, Moscato? I said, yeah. And this is the thing to get. The next big opportunity is not the thing that everybody's talking about on the discussion threads.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not another designer, single vineyard, high-end, blah, blah, BS. There might be opportunities for that. But if you're truly looking for products that are going to be disruptive in the market, Moscato was disruptive. And I was involved all the way through the product redevelopment of it, so it just smelled like Moscato. And they were able to go from 150,000 cases to 3.5 million cases in 7 years at a significantly higher selling price with a significantly lower cost of product. That's the wine business versus, oh, this, you know, we put crystals in the vineyard and, you know, we,
Well, Moscato too, probably when you started that project, you couldn't hardly give the grapes away out here. People were knocking them out left and right. And I think they were probably selling for $150, $175 a ton at that time.
They were right in that $150 a ton range. And then you're throwing on top of that grape juice, you know, to sweeten it. And again, the reason for the grape juice versus the concentrate was for the the retention of aromatics.
Yeah.
So anyways, and so if this is the assemblage of Grange or Opus One or Latour, it's the same fundamental processes. How do you have the product specifications that meet the expectations, meet or exceed the expectations of the market? How do you do it as profitably as possible? And are you in a business that you could actually sustain losing money for 5 years and then sell the brand? Or are you going to try to break even? It's a lifestyle kind of thing. Or do you need to run this as a business? Do you need to make money? And so from the very, very beginning of the process, you've got to kind of look all the way up and down the line. Okay? What else?
Can you give a quick answer? I think I understand why, but maybe you couldn't word it so well, on why some of these greater trends show up in the bulk wine market first.
Yes, because they're not waiting to be bottled, because it's the first to market.
Okay, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So where the trends, where supply and demand starts to peak first to show signs of strengths and weaknesses in the market is in the grapes. And you can actually watch the classified ads. In high demand, there are very, very few what we call spot market opportunities. Spot market is somebody doesn't have a contract. It may be actually a business strategy, but dang it, they're going to wait just till right even at harvest time and see how much they can get for their product. Right now, if people are doing that, they're kicking themselves in the ass, because it's going to start to be a bad strategy. Mm-hmm. Then the next product that's available is excesses that are starting to show up from previous vintages, and wine grapes that don't have a home that get sold off to be turned into bulk wine. And then also the wineries are doing their sales forecasting and whatever. So all of a sudden, inventories for bulk wine are starting to grow, and the prices are starting to fluctuate.
Okay.
And this is what Rich is pointing to. This is how Glen Ellen Winery got started in California. Really smart guy, Bruno Benziger. He was a grower, and he was actually worked for PepsiCo. Did I mention this to you guys? Bruno Benziger from Benziger Winery in Sonoma started the Glen Ellen brand, and when he did that, he was also working for Pepsi, because he negotiated bulk Yugoslavian wine to be traded for Pepsi concentrate, because it was under a communist regime and they wouldn't allow direct monetary trading.
Clever.
I know, it's crazy. I almost got hired to work with him in that, and I'm really sad. But what he did was, during anything from Yellowtail to Glen Ellen to all these wineries, so many of them get their start. Cameron Hughes was another one that said, hey, I'm going to be a negociant here. I just need some labels. I don't even need a production permit. I'm going to have people put this stuff together. I'm going to market and sell it. And this is how many, and so consider this, you're sitting on inventories of your brand at whatever price level. Now you've got all of a sudden these mercenary negociants coming in, undercutting the hell out of you. And you put a lot of time and effort into your position and your branding and stuff like that. You've got your money tied up. You've already paid for those grapes. You've already paid for those oak barrels and everything that you put into it. Now,
wine in your
all of a sudden-
story. You
what's
got
that?
so you have your wine and your story and all of your foo-foo stuff, but they have just as good a wine or better for half the price.
And you're looking, and you're going in and looking on the shelf or looking online and whatever. You go, what the hell is this?
You know, it got so bad last year. I mean, the typical, you know, most of the growers try to have a decent contract with an upcharge over whatever the district average is and all that kind of stuff. And then the other stuff goes on the spot market. And if you can't sell it to a winery on the spot market, the kind of last resort would be to go to one of the guys that just turns it into alcohol. Well,
Yeah.
last year it got so bad that those guys cut everybody off, because even the table grape growers, the ones you buy in the grocery store to put in your refrigerator, it was so bad for them that they were taking their grapes to the alcohol producers.
Well, and Noel and I were talking about a wide range of things today, but one of them was a Master of Wine exam question to get the best, to extract the best from a vineyard site, and then it was about trellising and this and that. But people fail the question because they immediately think best is Lafite or, you know, the highest quality grapes and so on. Well, very few people know kind of the history of gasohol in France. And France has been going through just enormous market shift. Consumption in France and Italy and Spain are down 85% from 60, 70 years ago. 85%. That's huge. The vineyards, the government was trying to come up with stimulus packages to tear vineyards out. And they made a critical mistake. They actually made it so that the gasohol program in France, and that's where gasohol really kind of got its traction and so forth, it became more profitable to plant vineyards to then sell to gasohol than it ever did for those kind of vineyards to make wine. And so their efforts to reduce vineyard area resulted in an increase in vineyard area. And so as an example, Noel, that's what I was using.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a sugar, the vineyard becomes a sugar factory to produce ethanol for gasoline additives, just as corn is in the United States being subsidized and going into the ethanol programs here. So again, you know, this business is crazier than most people ever get a glimpse of.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to send you. This is Ciati. They're a big wine and grape broker. Global, have offices all around the world. So does a company called Turrentine, an old friend of mine, Bill Turrentine. And what they do is they do these global market reports. And I'm going to send you a link. You can even go in here and go look at inventories and see what kind of stuff they've got available. And
cool.
It's not small quantities.
Tim, when you look at the bulk wine space, what type of margins is Cameron Hughes making?
It really is dependent on the type of wine, on the supply and demand cycles and availability. What Cameron Hughes has done is to create a model so that his customer base knows that some wines are available one time, you know, one and done, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so they refer to different lot numbers. They have other wines that they can have more consistency, because a lot of people want something recognizable and replicable. They don't want to go on a discovery trip every time they have wine. So he's been able to play the spot market. he can play the grape spot market and get wines custom crushed and made to specification. He can promote small producers and stuff as well. So he's even found a way to do that. The other model to look at is Naked Wines, not Naked Winery, which is a bulk wine thing here in Oregon and Washington, but actually Naked Wines based in the UK. Cameron Hughes went through a whole bankruptcy, Chapter 11 reorganization, and apparently survived that also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
When was
And have I told the Cameron Hughes story yet? Sometimes I get confused. I'm old.
Is that part of Vintage Wine Estates now? Cameron Hughes?
I'm not even sure. You guys will have to find out. But here's how he started his business, and apologies if I'm redundant. He went to a bulk wine company, I don't know which one, it could have been Ciotti or Turrentine or whatever, said, I want to taste whatever you've got in Napa Cabernet at this sort of price range, and some were higher and some were lower. And he went through and put together a blend, and then made an offer, said, if you can sell me enough for 10,000 cases at this price. And they said, okay, great. So he negotiated the price. He had 2 sample bottles of the blend he had made and asked them then, could you hold this stock for me for 30 days? And without any penalty or deposit. And they said, and because again, if it's an oversupply period, everybody's a little bit more amenable to terms and conditions. So he blended the wines, he's got the sample, he's reserved 10,000 cases, and he's got 30 days to make up his mind. And he takes his 2 sample bottles up to Kirkland, Washington. Anybody know what's in Kirkland, Washington?
Costco.
Costco. This is many years ago, okay? This was, I believe, in the 1990s, might have been in the early 2000s. He went to the Costco when it was kind of easy to get to the buyers. It's not now. And he said, hey, I've got a Napa Cabernet. I want you guys to try this. And he tastes it, and they all go, okay, yeah, that's really good. In the tasting panel and in the sales meeting. He says, I can have this, I can have 10,000 cases available to you in X number of days, and you will sell it at $7.99 a bottle, which will actually be a higher than your standard markup. Knowing their standard markup's 15%, he made it more profitable, put in plenty of margin for himself, made it good quality, and they said, shit, where do I sign? And he had his purchase order ready, said sign here. They signed the purchase order. For anybody familiar with banking, a legitimate signed purchase order is great collateral. He went to the bank because he didn't have the money to buy the wine, got a loan on the purchase order as collateral, went in and said, label this and bottle it, and that was the beginning of Cameron Hughes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story. All right, that is our time for today, y'all. All right.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody. And Wednesday, we're going to start transitioning towards marketing and so on. So we're just going to play with your projects, do your blending, and let me know any questions. And anytime after Monday, if anybody wants to have a call to kind of catch up, see what's going on, let me know. All right?
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well,